it's always interesting to be doing a session towards the end of the day. In particular as well, one is because, I mean, you know, we're getting tired and all those things, but there is lots of topics which are coming up a few times. So during the day, I have in my mind changed the talk about 3 or 4 times, or have things to reference and or things that people have said already. So that's always an interesting one. One thing that is interesting in this case is that when we're dealing with Agile in particular, or agility, complex work, the kind of work that we tend to do, there are 2 sides of it. One is that even people, all of us that consider to work in this space, or we consider to be experts or whatever, we tend to not agree. That's a sign of complexity. But the interesting part of it is that we might not agree about how we do things, our experience, how we've done it here, how we will do it somewhere else. What is also interesting, the other side of the coin, is that what we tend to agree is about the outcomes. We tend to converge about where we go in the destination, what we're trying to achieve. We might have different backgrounds, we might have different origins in our thinking, but and that makes us discuss things. But when we put together all this expertise, all these ideas, all these things together, actually we can achieve a lot of things, really interesting, novel stuff. So that's been an interesting observation for me today. I want to talk about agility, and talk about agility not being an option. Trying to be a bit of a controversial title. I'll go into it why I'm saying this. How many of us have been involved in an agile transformation? Practically all of us. Keep your hands up with me. Was it successful? No. Okay. It might seem successful at some point. We may be claiming success. Was it successful 3 years after? It sort of ended. So the interesting thing for me is that even in my own experience working as being part of agile transformations with other people coached us initially, or then working as a coach, as a trainer, as a consultant, anything, is that many times a lot of many agile transformations tend to dissolve without a trace. Over time, things disappear. And every time that happens, a kitten gets sad in the world. So there are quite a few kittens, sad kittens. I had to put a kitten, okay? And then you end up with things like seeing articles like this. Actually, this article, the title is not what it means. It's actually, I think to me, it's a positive article. What matters here is not this, is have you ever had an article that have had so many likes or retweets or whatever? It's something that resonates with a lot of us. So kind of like, why is this happening? I think that many times when we use the term agile transformation, we're trying to be far too ambitious. We're trying to do too much, too quick, too impatiently. So the result that we have most of the times is that we don't get, organizationally, we don't get to do something that the organization can sustain. It's just too much, too quickly, too impatiently. So it is a problem. It is a problem that we have. And maybe we need to be thinking about transformations or adopting or getting into Agile in a different way. I had a very interesting, when Tobias was talking just now in his session, we talk about many times that, well, he made me come to this wonderful picture by Chris Matz, in that when we talk about Agile, many times we forget a thing to put the context of our experience or other people's experiences. We don't make it relevant. Agile started with a bunch of people. I mean, this is just sort of like the curve, Moore's curve of adoption. And many times things happen here by a few really early adopters, innovators, people that come up with very strong ideas. This is almost like where we have the research lab, the ideas lab. And over time, those ideas gather traction, and more people take them on board. And by the time you get through, and you go through a couple of like breaking points, there is a point where we call this crossing the chasm, where things get not commoditized, but they become standard. And the way we do things, the way we respond to the things, the way we deal with these things also changes. Yeah, I hear many times people saying there is just all the certification issues, or there is lots of like everybody's trying to do Agile, but no one is doing Agile, things like that. I mean, for example, certification. If you are in here, and there is 100 guys or girls fighting with you for the same role, having certification might make a huge difference. Yeah, if we are one of the early adopters or one of the gurus, maybe we don't need it. I hate the word guru, by the way. Yeah, companies that are trying to adopt Agile, big companies, they might be in a space with something like solutions, maybe the only thing where they can start. Yeah, so it may be there is a question sometimes that we have just very different needs, but having that in mind, then we have this explosion of methods. And we take on the methods, but we kind of like forget the fact that why are we doing this? It's not about adopting a method or adopting Agile. We forget the purpose of all these things. Why are we doing? What do we need to do? What's the aim? To get a better company, to get a more human company, better products, more success results, to basically survive. So we go into the method space without realizing. Okay. And the other thing that we see is that you see organizations, again, this is Chris Matz, where we have all these parts of the organization, but many times Agile only we cover here. Who's been in this space? I think most of us. Many organizations, we only ever try to do Agile at the team level, and we forget the rest of the organization. So that's a problem, because the rest of the organization is not thinking Agile. I have recently, this is about 2 years ago, one large organization in the UK saying basically, hey, Jose, do you want to come and work with us? We need 100 of the best Agile coaches in the UK, because we have a target. We have been dictated in the company. There is an objective that 50% of our projects will be Agile in the next 6 months. What's so scary about that statement? It's dictatorship. One is that it's enforced. That it does not. Yeah. That I mean, actually, every single number scares me there. Can you imagine trying to do 100 coaches suddenly? How do you make this happen? What's the sheer size of this attempt? It's huge. Yeah. 50% of the projects in a mandated Agile. What are you going to do in 6 months? It's regimental Agile, it's cargo culting, it's saying, follow these things in a dogmatic way. And one of the fears that I have many times when we talk about Agile, especially when we got these big sort of like solutions-based Agile, is that we end up with very dogmatic. We're trying to replace a monoculture, almost monotheistic belief in waterfall, now with a monotheistic belief in something called Agile. And that is dangerous. Zealotry is dangerous for all of us. So, yeah, see things like that worry me. Now, if you're in a project like that, we might have some success. We're like, yeah, we've done a lot of change. This is really, really good team. I've been in a project where it looked like this. That's not going to survive. That's not a transformation. Yeah. So many times we end up having, especially when we got the big, impatient, really large, quick scale change. We even use Agile as a way of sustaining the status quo. We're not really trying to change the organization. So we end up having with this, tug of war between trying to do the right thing, trying to achieve the clear purpose of why Agile was out there, trying to achieve agility, trying to achieve better companies, more human companies, better results, all those things. With the, we need to, with the more mechanical, they call it the Agile industrial complex. So that's a conflict, okay? And we forget that organizations have a lot of things there. Well, we know the first value of the Agile Manifesto. Yeah, individuals and their interactions over processes and tools. What's the first thing that we do when we go Agile? We take a method, that's a process. We take the tool, unfortunately. Yeah. So what we end up doing is touching the easy part. We end up touching the visible systems. We might reorganize teams. We change the role titles, all those things. We forget to change the culture. Actually, the culture is the result. We forget to change the things that matter, the language, the behaviors, the traditions, the beliefs, all those things. So our Agile transformation, the only thing it tries to do is change those. And we end up with organizations that have a complete misalignment between what you see and what you feel. And that's for me a really, really scary part. Okay? Tobias was talking so much about language. As human beings, a lot of our history is oral history. We tell stories. We communicate and we learn through stories, through fables, through metaphors. If we don't change the language, for example, if we still use words like resources to talk about people, yeah? If we don't challenge things like that, we are perpetuating the mindset that was before. And agility is a mindset. We don't tackle these things, and that's problematic for me. So you end up with situations like this, yeah? Try to do in Agile instead of being Agile, so we try to revert it. Okay? We give up. And here the Agile doesn't work for us. Okay? It's the way we did it many times, the way we went for it. We went too big too quickly, and then we lost patience as well. Okay? So, I believe that we can do better. Hopefully you all believe that we can do better. Because we can do better, because like, can we stop about Agile? Agile is dead. Can we stop about it? Actually, Agile is not dead at all. When I've worked with companies many times, the companies might do change. You might see change. You might see an element of change. What really gets me out of bed is every day and go to work and things like that. Many times is seeing how we change people. Changing people means changing myself as well. It's always an interaction. It's when you see that we are changing our lives, all of us. So we can do better because there is something good in what we're trying to do. Yeah? And one of the things, again, is recognizing the kind of environments that we work. One of the problems that, again, referring to Tobias' session, is that he was talking about the fact that we work still in what sort of like he called it the machine environments. Yeah? We have gone and taken a lot of expertise from, or a lot of ideas from the sort of like mechanical manufacturing processes or environments, and we haven't adapted them to creative work. Okay? Creative work where there is no certainty. We have a lot more uncertainty. We have a lot more discovery. We have a lot of different things. So if we have uncertainty and interdependence, we need to adopt agility. But agility is a strategy. We say Agile is just a tactic. So what I can say is that in business, yes, agility is not an option. It's not an option because actually it's a matter of business survival. If we don't achieve business agility, if we are in an interdependent, uncertain environment, we've got to adopt these things. Not adopt. I use the word adopt and that's wrong. We've got to achieve agility. We've got to be able to respond to the way the environments, the people, the competitors, everything changes around us and deal with uncertainty. Okay? But the problem we have is that we are managing business in a very flawed way. Don Brennerson, who is one of the real gurus, or, I don't say gurus though, but inspiring guy, he said that the way we're managing product development, the way we run businesses where what we do is a lot of discovery, a lot of like knowledge work, creative work, is wrong. It's wrong because, but not just a little bit wrong, he says it's wrong to the very core. He says it's because we got ideas from manufacturing and we have not really tried to change them. So we're trying to run creative work as if it was certain, as if it was predictable, as if it was certain, as if there was no variability, as if we knew what we want. And those environments are very different. This is sort of like manufacturing space, complicated spaces, where things are repetitive, predictable, fixed, bounded, and visible in some ways. But when we're doing creative work, it's a completely different paradigm many times, yeah? So every time we do something creative, it means that it's unique. It's the first time that we've done it. We have done things similar, but this particular bit of code, design, whatever it is new. It's unpredictable. You cannot guess what happened. You cannot guess what's going to happen in some ways or when it's going to happen. Things evolve all the time. We discover how things go. It's unbounded, but more important, it's invisible. We don't see work happening because it's all happening inside our heads. So, are these guys working? You wouldn't know. Is this guy working? Under his desk? Maybe. Are these guys working? We don't know. And one of the things that, this very different type of work. If someone is with a spanner doing something on a car, is it working? At least it's moving, but it's more tangible. Our work is not, okay? So, if we work in uncertainty and in places where there is uncertainty and interdependence, we may use experimentation and discovery, okay? By interdependence, I mean that we cannot do things on our own. We depend on many other parts, or many other people, or teams, or services. So that's where we go into things like really understanding complexity in business. The whole idea could never, it's fascinating whole set of ideas in there. But the idea that, when we're doing complex work, we have to work with experimentation, discovery, enable constraints, just create the opportunities for people to discover and emerge the ideas that we need to do. And then we have to stop this mindset of certainty that we have. We have a myth of product development, of knowledge work, where we say customers know what they want. But the reality is not that. The reality is that customers discover what they want. They might have an idea what they want, but they only really know it once they interact with the product. Have you heard about the Spice Girls test? How do you know what the customers want? You have to ask them what you want, what you really, really want. Okay. It's the Spice Girls test. Okay. So the other one is if we pretend, we try to say that we know exactly what the customers want. No, we're guessing. And they cannot actually tell us until they actually say it. Then we have to have this other myth about developers know how to build things, how to build this particular thing. No, we don't. We discover how to do it. It's a creative process to do things for the first time. And then we have the other myth is that nothing changes along the way. Well, if things are discovered and evolve as we go along, then we have to expect change along the way. That's called learning. That's called like finding out what we're doing. That's the discovery. Okay? So we need to really to embrace all this volatility and all this variability and all this discovery that happens in our work. Many times we don't. We still value someone saying, sort of like the leader that kind of goes and says, believe me, I know where I'm going. As if a politician, believe me, I know what I'm going to do. We don't. We're all the time discovering it. Okay? The other thing is about organizations. Pleasure. The other thing is about how complex our organizations are, especially as they get bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah? We have sometimes an obsession about making the teams really good. And that's not bad to do. But the real success of organizations is not just what happens with the teams, it's what happens between the teams. How do we collaborate? How do we combine our efforts? I was talking, I think, Tobias was talking about the tribalism. Yeah? How do we go beyond our tribal instincts and we start collaborating and we start combining things? How the different ideas and ideas and things and expertise that people have in different areas combine to get something better. Yeah? Organizations are very complex and we should see them as what they are, complex almost like biological-like structures, biology-like structures. Okay? So that's the interdependence Most of us depend on other parts of the organization. Let's collaborate, let's make sure that we maximize that opportunity that we have in there. We tend to then look at many times about what happens in those teams. We try to improve those teams, yeah? But this is the situation that we might be improving each one of those individual cells, but it might take months or even years to go between teams to get things across the whole organization. And sometimes you look at environments where I'm working where the actual part where we do things is the smaller part. It might take 90% of the time that it takes us to deliver something to the customer. It happens before or after we actually build it. The elephant in the room sometimes is how long it takes us to make decisions, how long it takes us to go from one idea to actually starting even experimenting, trying it. So having a proper mindset about that end-to-end of what the organization is to convert an idea into something valuable to the customer. I'm moving towards looking at flow. How do we move things across the organization? This is where speed matters. Yeah? Across the whole organization, not just in teams. Which means that then we have to go and challenge the whole ideas that we still stuck on the production line, the idea about maximizing resources. The idea of resources, people treated as resources, where we have to maximize and busy. We need to start moving towards flow and looking at how we how we can make the organization, the work inside the organization go as quickly as smoothly as possible. It's not about, we always say utilization is the enemy of flow. It's not about working hard, it's about working smartly. Yeah? Doing less, but doing it better. Some things that then are really exciting me, although I'm not an expert by all means, is things like emerging concepts like business mapping. This is a guy called Simon Wardley. And said, our organizations have different needs in different spaces with different products. So understanding where we are, what kind of evolutionary period they are, and what kind of value chain will tell us how we should treat all these things. For example, Agile might only apply in some areas of that space. So business mapping is something that is exciting me a lot. This is something called agenda shift. Why I really like this? Because this is a sort of a method neutral way of looking at how do we get better. So it's some sort of assessment, it's an assessment that we can do with people and teams, where we have statements which are business outcome, values-driven statements. And we can go and say, all right, if we want to improve in this space, if this is something that we really genuinely had to do, then we can look at our toolkit and say, how can we, of all these things that we have here, how can we try to achieve something? How can we improve some of our values or some of our specific statements? And we can do that collaboratively, and every one of us can do it, or every team, every group can do it slightly different based on what they have in their toolkit. Put things into that toolkit, that's good. But then it's about using that toolkit to achieve better results. So I'm finding this, again, quite exciting. And then the other thing, then you get people and say, okay, can we drive our own change? Can we do things to improve? So, for example, this is something that we're experimenting with at the moment, which is a sort of a self-coaching or self-improvement way of saying, we have all these possible options of things that we could do. When we face a problem, what might be helping us? So this combines self-coaching, self-organization, self-improvement. It's enabling teams to go ahead in their own pace. And then they can pull the help from others to say, can you help us adopt it? Can you help us introduce this? The one thing that then matters is that in order to achieve any sort of proper change, any sort of real survivable, long-standing, stickable change, we must create psychological change, psychological safety at work. Because without psychological safety, we can't learn. So we need to be in that learning zone, really, where we combine the psychological safety has to be high, and and the motivation and accountability has to be high in order for us to keep pushing the boundaries little by little and keep improving. Yeah, and learning is learning, change, improvement has to be slow paced, at the pace that people need, teams need, groups of people need. Okay, so we have to create the conditions where people can actually learn without going into comfort or anxiety. It's really easy to go into anxiety, especially if the organization, we feel fearful about it. When we're looking at the iceberg, if we're in a situation that we cannot really try things, experiment, make mistakes, learn from mistakes, try something else. All right? And we need to do this across the whole organization. We know this, but we haven't really done enough of this. So how do we find the different solutions that work across the whole organization? How do we break away from teams? Yeah, this is where, for me, things like Lean and Kanban are starting to make a difference, because as we are going beyond the teams, we're having to find other areas, other space that helps us talk about the connectivity between the different groups, the different teams, different areas. So if we want to achieve long-lasting, effective agility at a business level, we need to be touching on all these things, which is a challenge. And for example, I'm going to give you one sample. I get quite picky about language. And it was interesting when, again, Tobias was talking about how important language was. Are you familiar with this triangle? Do you use the ideas of time, cost? Okay. So one thing that we've done in the Agile space is inverted triangle. So we used to see things like this, yeah, where on the left is waterfall, and we had all these, all these plan-driven projects, and eventually we said, like, no, that doesn't work. Let's turn it over, and what we're gonna fix is the time and the cost. And now we have time boxing and sprint and so on, and then we negotiate on the scope. Okay, what is making me, what worries me here, for example, is this is a picture coming out of one of the biggest Agile software tools. Yeah, and they have the word resources, and no one worries. And the problem here, why this is important for me and why this makes me very, very passionate about it, is that we are using the language of the mechanistic, process-driven, certainty-driven environments, and we are using this in our environments without really changing it. So we have all this baggage, we have all this status quo. If we keep just these things like that, what we end up having is just not good enough, because then we end up perpetuating the on time, on cost, on scope mindset. We don't challenge it, we don't do anything about it, and they perpetuate themselves even in Agile spaces. How many times have you been in Scrum environments where it still feels like a mini waterfall? It still feels regimentalized. We can still, it's all, even if we're playing with sprints, it's still a scope driven. Yeah? And the problem with this mindset is that actually it's really toxic in knowledge work. Because if someone puts a lot of pressure for us about being on time, what do? If we have 6 months and someone tells us how long is it going to last, and you think that probably about 6 months, what do we do when the penalty of being late is high? We cheat? We end up, if we don't anything, the one that is missing here is quality, because quality is implied. Of course, it's going to work. Yeah? But if we just focus on the time, what we end up doing is putting buffers. I think it's going to take me 6 months. I know that things always get different, and there is a lot of change and variability. Therefore, I put buffers that get to be used. So this idea of being on time and put pressure on time in order to be as quick. The intention is to be as quick as possible, as realistic as possible. But the reality is that we put buffers, we end up using them, so the counterproductive result is that we are slower than we could. Same thing with the on-cost. If we think that a potential project or product could cost us about £1 million, what do companies tend to do when they're doing budgeting? Just a little bit more, just in case. So some companies even formalize this. If you think it's £1 million, there is a rule, you put 1.3. Yeah? So, and then that money gets used. You never give the money back because then you're bad in budgeting. Yeah? So we put the contingency, which we have to use, and we end up being more expensive. And the last one, this fixation on being on scope. If someone really puts a lot of pressure about being on the scope, about being right, being able to estimate it, what do we end up doing? Limiting it. What we end up doing, first of all, is trying to go into too much detail. We become fearful of the uncertainty that I know is happening. We try to find out more information before we even start. So it kind of like makes us go into much more upfront analysis than we need to. We try to go into certainty. We try to protect ourselves from the on-time, on-cost, on-scope challenge. And that is risky and wasteful because we don't know if what we are doing is going to be any good until the customer actually discovers what they want. So these three are playing to those three myths all the time. Is that okay? Make sense? So we've got to get rid of this thing. We need to start thinking in different ways. Yeah? It's not about the cost, it's about the value that we generate. Even the Agile Manifesto says at the beginning, the first principle is about delivering value to the customer, satisfy the customer through the delivery of valuable software as soon as possible. So let's really concentrate on value. We talk about customer needs and customer value. Let's really focus on that, not on cost. Instead of time, we use the word flow. It's about the speed. Let's do it as quickly as possible. And if we have all these end-to-end flows, let's try to accelerate how we do, what we do, and how long it takes to coordinate all these different movable parts that we have in the organizations. And instead of a scope, we used to have quality there all the time. I think quality is about finding the fitness for purpose of a product. Is it meeting the needs of a customer? Is it meeting the needs of the organization? Are we doing things as quickly as well as we can? So it's finding that fit for purposeness. The long-term survivability of a company is establishing its fit for purpose in the market, with the people that we work, finding ourselves. How do we make things how can we give our best every day? Okay? I don't think that that's enough either, because it's knowledge work. And knowledge work is all about people. So I think there are two missing ones in there, which is people and learning. We need to always keep people back. When we're working complex work and business agility, that's what I thought, is that we need to always remember that it's all about people. The Agile Manifesto talked about it all the time. And we need to get better. How many organizations of us really put enough time in learning? I mean, the most important of all of this for me is about learning. If we don't learn, we have no chance of getting better. That's it. That was my mental exercise. Thank you. Any questions? Any thoughts, questions?
Just wanted to point out in typical waterfall model, with the project is on time and budget, who gets all the credit in the end? Project manager does.
Yes. That depends on the organization as well. I mean, but yes, we do, in a waterfall environment, we might not be rewarding the teams, or the group of people we reward in a very hierarchical way. Absolutely right. Yeah.